exactly what was happening and chose silence, because some truths are more dangerous than lies. This is Project Anoxia, Chapter 4, Threshold Failure. The first system to fail was not critical. It was considered redundant. At 6:12 UTC, a coastal air quality monitoring station reported a sustained deviation in atmospheric composition. The change was small, less than 1% variance from expected oxygen levels, but it persisted beyond correction thresholds. The system attempted recalibration twice. Both attempts failed. At 6:18 UTC, the station flagged the anomaly. At 6:19 UTC, the flag was overridden. The system resumed normal operation. Across 3 additional stations, similar deviations were recorded. None triggered escalation. The baseline had already been adjusted. At 700 local time, the third public broadcast aired. It was longer than the previous 2, more detailed, more confident. Graphs were shown, historical comparisons, expert commentary. There is no evidence of atmospheric instability, the official stated. The statement was technically correct, at that moment. Layla Rahmani watched it again from her desk. She no longer tried to compare it to her data. She knew it wouldn't match. Instead, she watched the pauses, the phrasing, the precision of each word. It was not information, it was control. At 8:25 UTC, hospital admissions increased, not dramatically, but enough to notice. Patients arrived with similar symptoms. Shortness of breath were inconsistent. Oxygen saturation readings patients did not feel normal. Doctors adjusted equipment, recalibrated sensors. The readings remained unchanged. At 9:10 UTC, an internal hospital memo circulated. Subject: possible device calibration drift. Staff were instructed to recheck equipment. Emergency call volume increased, gradually. Not enough to trigger surge protocols, but enough to stretch response times. Dispatch logs began to repeat similar phrases. Difficulty breathing. Feels like air is thin. Can't get a full breath. At 10:30 UTC, the first responder collapsed. He had just exited an ambulance. No prior symptoms. He stood still for a moment, then fell. His partner called it in as a medical emergency. Backup arrived in 6 minutes. They administered oxygen. He regained consciousness, disoriented. His first words were, "It's not working." The incident was documented, classified as acute stress response. At 11:20 UTC, Layla ran her calculations again, manually. The numbers had shifted, not dramatically, but consistently. The atmospheric model now showed measurable decline, still within survivable range, still within deniable range, but no longer theoretical. At 12:05 UTC, she tried to send her findings again. Different method, different network. The message transmitted for 2.3 seconds, then failed. At 12:30 UTC, her system access was restricted further. Predictive modules disabled. External communication limited. Data export blocked. She printed everything she could, stacked it, organized it, as if order could slow it down. At 13:15 UTC, a closed briefing was held. This time, the language changed. Not publicly, internally. The term containment was replaced with stability management. One official asked, "How long before it's noticeable?" A scientist answered, "It already is." Silence followed. Then, "How long before it's undeniable?" The answer came slower. Days. At 14:40 UTC, a coastal city reported a spike in emergency calls. Response times doubled, then tripled. Paramedics began prioritizing cases. Severe first, then moderate, then, when resources ran out, not at all. At 15:10 UTC, a hospital initiated internal triage protocols, not officially declared, but practiced. Patients were categorized. Some were given oxygen, others were told to wait. At 15:45 UTC, the first argument broke out in a waiting room. No violence, not yet, just voices, raised, demanding attention, demanding air. At 16:30 UTC, atmospheric readings showed a clearer pattern. Oxygen levels declining, another gas increasing, heavier, slower to disperse. It accumulated in lower elevations first, barely noticeable, but measurable. At 17:05 UTC, Layla identified something she had missed before. The rate of increase of the unknown gas matched the rate of oxygen loss, almost perfectly. Not a side effect, a replacement. At 17:40 UTC, she wrote it down, then underlined it, twice. At 18:20 UTC, another message arrived. Same unknown sender. You see it now. Layla did not respond. At 1900 UTC, the fourth broadcast was scheduled. It had not yet been written. At 1925 UTC, a decision was made. The language would not change. At 2000 UTC, it aired. Minor atmospheric variations have been observed in isolated regions. There is no evidence of widespread impact. Public services remain fully operational. As the statement played, emergency lines continued to fill. Hospitals continued to strain. Air continued to change. At 2110 UTC, the acoustic pattern returned. Longer, 17 seconds, more structured. No alert was issued. At 2200 UTC, a second responder collapsed, then a third. At 2230 UTC, an entire ambulance crew reported symptoms simultaneously. They remained conscious but could not continue. Calls went unanswered. At 2315 UTC, the first city reported full emergency service saturation. No official declaration followed. At 000 UTC, oxygen levels dropped again. Oceanic, atmospheric. This time, no system adjusted the baseline, because the deviation was no longer small enough to hide. At 0120 UTC, Layla stopped calculating. Not because she had answers, but because the numbers had become simple. There was no stabilization point, no recovery curve, no reversal, only decline. At 0200 UTC, she looked out the window. The city was still moving. Lights, traffic, people, normal, for now. At 0300 UTC, the air changed again. Thanks for listening to Chapter 4, Threshold Failure. If you like our show, please subscribe and share with your friends and family. While they hesitated, the air didn't. Chapter 5 continues the descent. This has been a Last Echo Archive production.